Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. And we now know exactly how far behind you I am.
What do you mean?
I mean 6 years. I mean, you were on The Simpsons in 2013, and I was on The Simpsons last night.
Yay!
And that is how far behind Rachel Maddow I am. 6 full years. Hey, Rachel, tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, we're gonna leave that picture up later in the hour. Tomorrow night, how much time do you want? Because apparently the president's going to steal about 8 minutes of your show, maybe a little more, and
Democratic rebuttal.
And Democratic rebuttal, they want equal time, which I hope they get. So I want you to have as much time as you need, and I got some space here at 10 o'clock. So
you know, I'll be
don't
fine.
worry about the bell going off at 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Is what I'm tomorrow night. So
I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
Okay, totally up to you.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, we are here tonight because of the failing memory of an old man. 70 years old is old for a presidential candidate, at least we always thought it was. And Donald Trump's ability to retain information was never good, and obviously was getting much worse when he was contemplating his run for president. And so, according to a New York Times report this weekend, the wall was just a way to help Donald Trump's failing memory. The Times reports, as Mr. Trump began exploring a presidential run in 2014, his political advisors landed on the idea of a border wall as a mnemonic device of sorts, a way to make sure their candidate would remember to talk about getting tough on immigration, which was to be a signature issue of his nascent campaign. How do we get him to continue to talk about immigration? Sam Nunberg, one of Mr. Trump's early political advisors, recalled telling Roger Stone, another advisor, "We're going to get him to talk about he's going to build a wall." And so the 70-year-old builder running for president was able to remember that there was something he wanted to build. And his supporters turned that into a chant, and he told them who would pay for it. Mexico will pay for the wall. And because of that lie, from that man with that failing memory, we are now in the 17th day of a partial shutdown of the American government because the Mexican government will not pay for the wall that President Trump now wants American taxpayers to pay for. Today, the President of the United States requested time on all major broadcast television networks tomorrow night at 9 p.m. to lie to the American people and the world. The White House requested about 8 minutes of time from the entertainment networks to invade their primetime schedules with an address by President Trump from the Oval Office. The networks thought about it. Was not an easy decision. And they granted that time to the president. And now the Democratic congressional leaders, Senator Chuck Schumer and Speaker Nancy Pelosi, have requested equal time to respond to the president. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, expects one thing from the president's speech. I expect the president to lie to the American people. Why do I expect this? Because he has been lying to the American people. Kind of logical. The president is going to lie. The president intends to tell the world why we need a Trump wall on the southern border and why the government must remain partially shut down and unfunded until Congress agrees to pay for the wall that Donald Trump promised Mexico would pay for. Donald Trump will lie tomorrow night about terrorists entering this country across the southern border. We just don't know yet exactly which version of that big lie he will tell. The official Trump White House lie, as told by the White House press secretary, is that 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally at the southern border. That is an invented number. NBC News has reported today that U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered only 6 immigrants at ports of entry on the U.S.-Mexico border in the first half of fiscal year 2018, whose names were on a federal government list of known or suspected terrorists, according to CBP data provided to Congress in May 2018 and obtained by NBC News. 6. The total number of people encountered at our borders in a typical year whose names appear on the federal government's list of so-called known or suspected terrorists is about 2,000. In 2017, there were 2,554, and almost all of them are being encountered at airports. Airports are by far the most vulnerable point of entry in the United States for known or suspected terrorists, and President Trump has not done one thing in response to that known threat, and has not said one thing in response to that known threat. The president will lie about that tomorrow and pretend that there is a much bigger terrorist threat at our southern border. The president will probably drop his lie that former presidents have told him they wished they had built a wall on the southern border. Every living former president has now publicly denied any such conversation with Donald Trump. And today, Jimmy Carter joined that group in a written statement saying, I have not discussed the border wall with President Trump and do not support him on the issue. Here's a lie that the president might tell tomorrow night.
I may declare a national emergency dependent on what's going to happen over the next few days.
So you don't need congressional approval to build the wall?
No, we can use them. Absolutely. We can call a national emergency because of the security of our country. Absolutely. No, we can do it.
That is absolutely a lie. The president does not have that power in this situation, and if he issued an order like that, it would be challenged in court immediately, the way his Muslim ban was challenged in the first week of his presidency, and federal judges would stop the president's illegal order as quickly as they stopped his Muslim ban. The president got very good legal advice on this matter this morning from Fox News senior legal analyst, former judge Andrew Napolitano.
The president said he's threatening he will declare a national emergency to build that wall. Can he do that?
In a word, no. No, that's not me saying no, because the Supreme Court said no when Harry Truman attempted to do that. When there was a steel strike during the Korean War, he asked the Congress to authorize him to seize the steel mills and operate them against the strikers' wishes and produce steel for our troops who desperately needed it in the Korean War. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. Congress can do it. Congress can pay for the steel mills and operate them, but the president can't do it on his own. Stated differently, the Supreme Court has made it very clear, even in times of emergency, the president of the United States of America cannot spend money unless it's been authorized by the Congress.
Leading off our discussion now, Maria Teresa Kumar, the president and CEO of Voto Latino. Also joining us, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, and Tim O'Brien, the executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion. All three are MSNBC contributors. And Maria Teresa, we have a report from Politico tonight indicating that the president and the White House are worried about Republican members of the House now peeling off and voting for the Democratic bill if and when Nancy Pelosi brings it to a vote again. And I shouldn't call it the Democratic bill. This is the bill that passed the United States Senate unanimously in a voice vote. No senators challenging it, Democrat and Republican supporting it. Politico is reporting that a senior House GOP aide said that Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader, and his top lieutenants believe 15 to 25 Republicans will vote with Democrats this week, possibly even more. And Maria Teresa, they are starting to calculate what is the number at which that could grow to override a possible presidential veto.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head. We just elected a whole new Congress that came into the House that were sworn in because the American people said, I don't care what your shenanigans are, Mr. President. I don't care that you keep trying to basically make these individuals, these caravan of individuals coming to our southern border and trying to scare us and making the midterm elections all about building a wall and about refugees and seeking asylum. Instead, what the American people said is that they were going to vote in a new Congress for new blood. Behind closed doors, a lot of the Republicans are basically saying they're making calculations not only for their immediate future, but for their future in 2020, and they want to continue having these positions of power. They also are, what I'm hearing behind closed doors, also folks are saying that they are finally feeling that they are free to actually do the governing that they've chosen as public servants, and that's one of the things I think that is going to be very difficult for McCarthy, because McCarthy has been trying to keep the Freedom Caucus alive as much as possible, and if if Nancy Pelosi is able to bring in so many Republicans, not only is it a coup for her, but the Republicans' leadership and Trump are in far much more trouble than they could have possibly imagined.
And Jason, on that first test vote, 7 Republicans moved over to the Democratic side. The Republicans now fearing as many as 25, possibly more. The magic number is 55. If 55 Republicans move over, then you can override the veto. And of course, if that kind of movement is happening in the House, Mitch McConnell will not be able to block a vote in the Senate, where already there were a couple of Republican senators saying we should vote on this.
Right, Lawrence, because in a couple of weeks, the Republicans are going to have to fold. They don't really have a choice. Not every agency has run out of money yet, but you're going to have several more agencies running out of money over the next 3 or 4 days. You're going to have small towns in Midwestern and Western states where the only employer is the Department of Interior or Forestry or federal marshals. As more and more people start missing paychecks, as we start going into later parts of January, early parts of February, I don't even necessarily think it'll take that long, the Republicans are going to fold. And so the question is not going to be if this eventually is going to get stopped. The government shutdown is going to end. The question is going to be, how do the Republicans prepare to explain their betrayal to President Trump? Because all of this, most Republicans don't think this is a good idea. It's impractical. The wall there's no functional, historical, or economic justification for having this kind of wall, and they've only done it out of loyalty to this president. So when they stab him in the back and they vote for what's right to put workers back to work, they're going to have some explaining to do.
All reporting is indicating that the Trump White House had no plan, no strategic plan for a government shutdown, and Donald Trump certainly didn't have one. And Tim O'Brien, you are the least surprised person in the world to hear that, because you, many reasons, you know Donald Trump better than any of us. You've been sued by him for your book about him. You crushed him in that lawsuit about your book. And your piece today is headlined, "Trump was never a great deal maker, and the shutdown proves it." And that is one of the great ironies of the guy who had his phony best-selling book entitled The Art of the Deal. Every business person I know in New York says that no one knows less about the deal than Donald Trump.
Yeah, Lawrence, are we surprised at this point that the White House had no plan, absolutely had no plan for how to deal with this? You know, there's not a crisis on the southern border. There's a crisis in the Trump presidency. And the crisis is that he is inept. He has boxed himself into a corner around the budget negotiation, and he's constantly pushing the limits of how extreme he can get to try to claw back federal funds so he can build a wall that nobody in his party supports and no one in the opposition supports, and everyone else holds all the cards. He made a very crucial mistake early on in December when he said to Schumer and Pelosi that he'd be happy to take on responsibility for the shutdown. And anybody who's been in Washington, any politician who's been in Washington for any length of time, knows that voters grow very weary very quickly of government shutdowns, and the person who has that saddled around their neck doesn't come off very well. Newt Gingrich learned this in 1995 and 96 at the hands of Bill Clinton. Donald Trump, because he is not a student of that history, because he is not steeped in policy, and because he's inept, went out on his own and said, I'll take on responsibility for the shutdown. He's left himself without any negotiating leverage, and the Democrats can just sit by and watch this spin for a certain period of time while the effects of the shutdown land at his feet. And as you noted, this is not a new problem. During his business career, he was a serial bankruptcy artist. He was routinely taken to the cleaners by other deal makers who were more informed, more patient, and more mature than he is. And those sort of things have come home to roost in this negotiation.
And no one in the history of American government shutdowns has gotten the language of the situation worse than Donald Trump. We saw him say in the Oval Office, I will do the shutdown. I'll take responsibility for it. I won't blame you. He couldn't have gotten that worse. Now he's out there actually pretending that he understands something about the federal government workers who are on their way to missing their first paycheck at the end of the week. And this is where he's going to, there's not a single Trump supporter out there who thinks Donald Trump has any idea what it's like to be a government worker missing a government paycheck. Let's listen to the way Donald Trump talked about that.
I can relate, and I'm sure that the people that are on the receiving end will make adjustment. They always do. And they'll make adjustment. People understand exactly what's going on. But many of those people that won't be receiving a paycheck, many of those people agree 100% with what I'm doing.
Maria Teresa, he can relate to TSA agents not receiving their paychecks.
Let's be absolutely clear. A trust fund baby president has no idea what the average American has when it comes to trying to put food on the table, getting up in the morning, trying to make ends meet, having to not only make sure that they're paying their bills, but they're also perhaps meeting their medical obligations. It's nonsense. And for every single federal employee right now that is forlorn, or for those individuals that are working to keep us safe, whether it's the TSA agents or those meat inspectors in rural America so that we could have safe meat to eat at our table, I want to thank you, because you're doing above and beyond the call of duty, something that this president has not only neglected to do, but has also actually demurred his own service for them.
Tim O'Brien, my favorite line in there, after I can relate the absurdity of that, Donald Trump says, they will make arrangements. They'll just make arrangements. Government workers who's living from paycheck to paycheck who are running out of money. Donald Trump's arrangement was always to just go to his father and say, hey, my casinos are going bankrupt. Could you please pour millions of dollars into my casinos?
Please show up with a lawyer and give me $3 million, because everyone can do that. And what does he mean by making arrangements? That they won't pay their rent? That they won't get medical treatment for their kids, that they won't buy groceries? Those aren't things that people make arrangements for. Those are hardcore sacrifices that imperil people financially. And he's absolutely not in touch with any of that, and he's never been particularly sympathetic to the plight of working class people. When he ran his casinos in Atlantic City, he stiffed his vendors. He has plowed willy-nilly through his blue-collar workforce at his casinos. He is not someone who has any kind of personal or professional knowledge of the challenges that working-class folks face.
Tim O'Brien, Maria Teresa Kumar, Jason Johnson, thank you all for starting us off tonight. And when